Over the course of the war in Ukraine, the battlefield has been defined by the sheer presence and variety of combat drones. In the early phase, purpose-built military UAVs dominated. Russia leaned on Iranian-supplied Shahed 136, while Ukraine briefly crowned the Bayraktar TB2 the uncontested king of the sky, especially on long-range missions where traditional interceptor-based defenses struggle to compete. Later, to cut costs, both sides increasingly fielded simple, expendable drones repurposed from commercial toys. Now, Ukraine appears ready to debut one of its boldest, most innovative designs yet. The Mongoose, a jet-powered, reusable interceptor drone equipped with a shotgun-like multi-barrel ordnance system designed explicitly to shoot down enemy drones repeatedly. The Mongoose is not merely another weapon. It's a rethink of air defense in an era where interception economics have flipped. To understand why it matters, start with the math facing modern air defenses against drone swarms. The core problem is the cost mismatch between cheap threats and expensive interceptors. A Patriot interceptor compatible with Ukraine's PAC-3 batteries costs over $3 million. A NASAMS AIM-9 X-class shot runs a bit over $1 million. Against high-end cruise missiles, each worth millions, that math can still work, even if 2 interceptors are required. Scale that up to dozens or hundreds of missiles, and you can bankrupt the attacker by downing million-dollar weapons with cheaper defensive shots. But against Shahed drones, estimated at $20,000 to $50,000 each, conventional intercepts can cost tens of times more than the incoming target. In that scenario, the war becomes arithmetic. If an attacker can use relatively cheap drones to destroy things worth orders of magnitude more, they win economically even when many are shot down. Russia embraced that reality, ramping up Shahed use from roughly 200 launches per week to over 1,000 by March 2025, sustaining pressure with ever larger raids. On July 9th, it set a grim record with a peak strike involving 728 Shahed-type drones and decoys, forcing Ukrainian defenders to spend millions on interceptors to stop attacks measured in the tens of thousands of dollars, even when they succeeded. It's a game where the defender loses money every time they win. Enter the Mongoose, from Odessa-based Teknari Design Bureau, built as a direct answer to this economic warfare. Designed for multiple sorties, with a multi-shot weapon that can engage several targets per launch, the system reduces the total number of interceptors required. What makes it distinctive is not just reusability, but its weapon, a multi-barrel shotgun aimed at disabling enemy drones by striking their propulsion. Teknari argues this is enough to down Russian-Iranian UAVs. The choice isn't arbitrary, it reflects a nuanced reading of small drone vulnerabilities. Conventional interceptors rely on kinetic hits or fragmentation to destroy an aircraft, detonating and shredding airframes or fuel systems. The Mongoose combines that logic with a surgical yet forgiving approach. Shotgun rounds widen the damage area and raise hit probability without pinpoint precision. Shaheds, small, slow, and low, are hard to spot on radar, but those same traits make them fragile. Exposed engines, unprotected propellers, and featherweight structures mean modest hits can cause catastrophic failure. Aim at the engine or prop and a blast that would barely scuff a fighter jet can topple a Shahed. The Mongoose's design reflects deliberate trade-offs. A compact jet engine pushes it to roughly 200 miles per hour, enough, per its technical specs, to run down the most common Shahed variants. With an effective combat radius around 8 miles, it fills a last-line, point defense niche against inbound threats. The numbers are modest by fighter standards, but calibrated for the mass-produced Shaheds that make up Russia's bulk attacks. Original Shahed 136s top out near 110 miles per hour and fly between roughly 196 and 13,000 feet. Russian upgrades reportedly cruise around 8,200 feet at about 130 miles per hour. More recently, Ukrainian air defenses have observed jet-powered variants clocked at 380 to 400 kilometers per hour, with some near 480, but those do not yet appear in numbers sufficient to change the overall balance. Guidance is another key innovation. Teknari says it developed an additional thermal guidance mode tailored to the Shahed's relatively low heat signature, enabling tracking even amid heavy electronic warfare where GPS jamming can cripple other systems. They claim visual identification at up to 2,600 feet, with auto guidance kicking in about 490 to 656 feet from the target. From there, the Mongoose executes an automatic attack without operator input. Crucially, the developers engineered the gun employment envelope to avoid self-damage. Unlike many one-way interceptors, they estimate a Mongoose could down 10 to 12 Shaheds over its service life. After an engagement, it can loiter for additional targets, then return to base for refuel and reload, trading cost savings for tactical flexibility. One launch can potentially neutralize multiple threats in a single sortie, impossible for kamikaze interceptors. This reuse and rearm philosophy, Teknari CEO Gennady Soldin argues, will matter even more as Russian drones adopt more powerful props and jets. Instead of chasing absolute speed, build interceptors that adapt and survive to fight again. The production math reinforces the approach. Ukraine's annual need for anti-Shahed interceptors is around 200,000 units, far beyond what any current supplier can deliver quickly, yet 5,000 to 7,000 reusable Mongoose-type drones could offset tens of thousands of expendables. Compared with Patriot, the Mongoose lives in a different strategic lane. Patriot exists for high-value, high-threat engagements, cruise and ballistic missiles, aircraft, and is fielded in small numbers with large crews and multiple subsystems, radar, launchers, transport. Each interceptor is built for a single target. Using them on small, cheap drones or glide bombs makes little sense. The Mongoose, by contrast, appears operable by small teams, perhaps even a single operator, and is inherently more scalable. Range underscores the doctrinal split. Patriot's radar reaches over 90 miles. The Mongoose fights within roughly 8 miles. What looks like a disadvantage is actually role differentiation. Patriot for wide area strategic defense, Mongoose for point defense optimized against Shaheds. This matters because Russia's Shahed threat keeps evolving. Early models flew low and slow and fell to mobile teams with gunfire. Newer ones stretch speed and altitude, demanding dedicated tracking and software-driven weapons. Electronic warfare that once spoofed GPS to dump drones safely in fields must now contend with improved multi-channel navigation. Decoy tactics add strain. Platforms like the Gebra mimic Shaheds at range, compelling Ukraine to spend real resources on false targets. There's also the Shahed 238, Jiran 3, a turbojet loiterer that Russian sources claim can hit 500 miles per hour in a dive. While a 200 mile per hour interceptor cannot match that dive, it can still intercept most cruise speeds seen today, making Mongoose-class interceptors a necessary piece of a layered future. Faster jet drone interceptors can fill the gap against truly high-speed threats. Challenges remain before Mongoose moves from prototype to scaled force. By mid-2025, Teknari reportedly completed its first squadron and prepared mock-ups for Ukrainian air defense brigades, with demand rising as attacks surged from 2024 onward. But mass production requires industrial capacity that wartime Ukraine struggles to sustain. Defender Media reports outside investment has arrived to continue development and scale, yet Russia is producing over 5,000 long-range drones monthly, split between strike and decoy classes, pressuring Ukraine to match with reusable defenses. Training also matters. While simpler than a Patriot battery, reusable platforms still need skilled operators to exploit their full potential, unlike single-use kamikaze UAVs. Technical limits exist too. An 8-mile engagement envelope suits point defense but limits area coverage, forcing overlapping zones and staggered placements to counter massed raids. A Mongoose can eliminate multiple drones per sortie, but not simultaneously. Its shotgun concept likely implies short, nearly point-blank employment, demanding rapid, repeated intercept runs within a swarm. Speed growth on the threat side could also outpace current design choices, pushing Mongoose toward bigger engines, higher fuel flow, and airframe changes, essentially a new vehicle. Thermal guidance brings its own constraints. Shaheds emit little heat, so sensors must be precise and are likely expensive. Weather can degrade thermal performance, shrinking an already short engagement window. Many details remain necessarily opaque. Ukraine will keep sensitive data secret, so public specs and performance claims may lag reality. Possible future upgrades include networking multiple Mongoose platforms into cooperative defensive swarms, mirroring Ukraine's advances in offensive swarming to overwhelm attackers via numbers and coordination. The big idea travels beyond Ukraine. Traditional air defense assumes each inbound threat is valuable enough to justify an expensive interceptor. That logic collapses against swarms of cheap drones. The Mongoose argues for reusable, relatively inexpensive intercept platforms that win by persistence and aggregate effect rather than exquisite single-shot overmatch. Ukraine's former deputy chief of the general staff has said the country needs up to 25 more Patriot systems to blanket key cities, but even unlimited Patriots cannot make the economics work against mass drone raids. Coming from the same improvisational culture that turned consumer quadcopters into tank killers and fielded AI-guided swarms, the Mongoose shows how necessity can outpace slow, traditional procurement cycles. For many nations, the choice between a few prestige batteries and thousands of adaptable, easy-to-operate drones will tilt toward the latter, especially if small platforms can be delivered on demand. As the Mongoose moves from prototype to production, everything hinges on factories, funding, and whether combat trials prove it can truly down multiple threats per engagement. If it does, this shotgun-armed, jet-powered interceptor could quickly become one of the world's premier anti-drone systems, arriving just in time to tame the swarms terrorizing Ukraine's skies.